Well, happy Monday. I hope you're starting out your week with a big dose of faith and optimism and excitement about what God's using you to do and to build out. And I want to talk about that today as we kick off this week. Thank God it's Monday. We get to start a new week. And I'm considering the idea that we could build up the ministry or the movement or the company or the team that God has called us to without burning out. And I think you and I, we look around, we see a lot of people grinding really hard, working really hard, and a lot of times they start really strong or they go really fast, but they don't make it for the long haul. And maybe you've even been in that situation before where you burned out. You know, you ran out of energy, you ran out of money, you ran out of something, ran out of time, ran out of relationships, whatever. But you didn't make it for the long haul, and you are doing this now, in a way to say, I want to start over more intelligently. And I'm excited about your journey. I want you to build something that lasts, that's eternal, that God can use to shape this world in a way that honors him. And I think that's the whole pursuit of our lives. And I'm excited to be a leader in the ring with you. So let me talk to you about a couple of things. First, let me set the stage. A few years ago, this was a number of years ago, 9 years ago right now, I sat with a friend who was encouraging me to start something in our city. It would have been, at that point, the seed of something that's now a church planting network in the Portland, Oregon area called Multiply PDX. And he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, I think you should dream big and start small. And I loved those words because it felt in my grasp. That was something I definitely can dream big, but the start small was a permission that I needed at that time. And I took it. And so I did. And I started really small. And we did start something together, which was really fun. With this individual's help, we really started rallying people to this idea of collaborative church planting for a city like Portland, Oregon that needs a lot more churches. And over the years, it's developed. It's now a team of people. It's now part of a larger initiative. And it's been really, really fun to see it develop and grow. But if we hadn't have started small with a big dream, I don't think we've ever gotten off the ground. And that's a little bit what I want to talk to you about with this idea. It really comes from Genesis chapter 12. It's Abraham, one of my absolute heroes. He was the father of faith. If you know the Bible, you know that he not only shows up in the book of Genesis, but also shows up throughout the Bible. And then, of course, in Hebrews 11, the hall of faith that we read about in the New Testament. But one of the things God says to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, check this out. He says, I will make you into a great nation. And I mean, if there's ever been a big dream put forth, it was that. It was this huge idea that Abraham, God's like, look out, count the stars, try to count the sand. I'm going to make, the number of people that you impact is going to be, you can't even count. I'm going to make you into a great nation. And so how do you start on something like that, right? Because you could go full bore and 90 miles an hour, pedal to the metal, don't stop. This is eternal work. This is important. You could sacrifice your family. You could sacrifice everything, and you would burn out. And you would actually destroy a lot of things along the way. Clearly, that's not the way to win. And it's not even how Abraham approached it, because it does say in Genesis chapter 12, it says, in verse 9, it says, and then Abraham continued traveling south by stages toward the Negev, the river. I think that's really important because south by stages, he traveled by stages. He didn't try to take the journey all at once. He didn't try to attack all the enemies at once. He didn't try to, to grow all the teams at once. He didn't try to develop all the flocks at once, build all the resources, create all the relationships. It was by stages. And I want you to think about your own dream, God-given dream, what the end goal is, but what the stages might be, and even what the stage that you're in right now. So first principle I want to teach you today is on pacing. And this is, man, I needed this a long time ago. I still need this. But the idea of pacing is so important. I mean, Abraham paused along the way to build altars and commune with God, and it underscores the idea of deliberately creating rest stops deliberately. Do you have any? Have you thought about that? Do you take rest stops? Do you pause ever to go, how's it going? How are we doing? How am I feeling? What's working? What's not working? Are we on track? Are we off track? Rest stops can be so important. And I think it's about setting realistic milestones to go, well, let's push toward this. Let's push toward something that's a milestone. If you were climbing a mountain, you'd be like, well, there's base camp, and then there's this this summit, and then there's the next summit, and we wouldn't try to take the whole mountain at one time. And I think that's just really important. And then celebrate small wins. So important. This is one thing I overlook the most in my ministry so far of 27 years is celebrating, wins. And I'm starting to focus a lot more on that because I realize how important it is for me and for other people to really feel those wins. And then about the pacing is adapt as you move. It's stages, right? Your activity in this stage isn't supposed to be the same as the next stage. And if you try to change stages without changing the way you act, the things you do, it's not going to work. It's a different stage. So it's important for us to go, okay, I can adapt as I move. And I think that's just a big part of pacing. Second thing I'd like to hit on is seasons and capacity. Having a seasonal mindset is super important. Ecclesiastes 3 talks about, there's a time for everything. Not every season is one for high intensity growth. Sometimes it's about consolidating. And sometimes it's about shoring up some pieces. It's not always about growth. Again, one of my weaknesses has been only focusing on growth. So I need this as much as anybody. But important thing is to identify our season. And is it a season to plant, water, or harvest? I mean, there's different seasons. And then to build capacity, to build your team, resources, and personal skills so you're ready for the next stage. Sometimes you're just in that stage of building capacity. That's all it is. And certainly to guard your energy, to watch out, make sure that you got to recognize when you're starting to feel overwhelmed and know what to do about it. I was reminded recently how important it is to know how to renew your own self. And David, the great leader of the Bible, did that too. He renewed himself. He found strength in God, it says. And maybe there's part of that for you and me is to go, what season is it and what is my capacity right now? And what is my team's capacity? And just understanding our seasons and building that right capacity can be such a win in building this big thing, but doing it in a way that doesn't burn anybody out. So traveling south by stages like Abraham, traveling in your journey by stages, so important. The last little thing I want to talk about is reaching for the stars versus not betting the farm. Okay, just balancing faith and foresight, I guess is one way to say it. To have that biblical boldness, but to have the wisdom to have healthy risk management. Once again, been a weakness of my own past leadership. And if you looked over my journey, I think you'd start to see some of the growth points in these things where there's been a little more maturity in my own leadership. But it took me a little longer than most people probably. And that's okay. But we got to have these visionary goals. I believe in visionary goals. I think God wouldn't have told Abraham, I'm going to make you into a great nation, if he didn't also believe in visionary goals. And at the same time, visionary goals and calculated steps, right? That's the hard part. That's the discipline part. And sometimes a leader like me needs to shore up my weaknesses by bringing somebody on the team who can be a partner in those things. And that's been a huge blessing for my own context, where I have such a wonderful team that I get to work with, where I can be the visionary leader and I can get some help on what are these calculated steps. That might not be your greatest strength. That's okay. You don't have to be good at everything. But you got to find the people that can help you to balance out, to round out what the skills needed are. And so I think if we can kind of do this thing where we're a foot in both worlds, in boldness and in prudence or shrewdness or wisdom, to be able to say, yeah, we're going to go for it, but we're going to do it in calculate. We're going to do it with steps. We're going to count the cost, We're not going to run out of money or people or energy. We're going to be careful about that stuff. And I think so some practical takeaways, all right? If you're thinking, yeah, I probably need to grow in this thing of building it up without burning myself out, here's a couple things. One is to create a roadmap. What would it look like if you created a roadmap that had some milestones in it? Some summits that you could push toward and go, when we get there, we can slow down, stop, evaluate, kind of see how things are, regroup a little bit, and feel and celebrate the wins and feel good about taking a little break, taking a rest stop, and then getting going again. So that's one thing. And then schedule those faith check-ins, maybe even between milestones, to go, are we pausing? Are we praying? Are we getting our tank filled? So important. And evaluate the risks and the resources. That you would say, it's, sometimes you don't push because you can't afford to. Sometimes you can't afford not to. And knowing the difference is the key to really great leadership. So I would encourage you to be somebody who's take a step back for a second and evaluate, where are you at? What's your leadership need right now? What's your season? What's your pace? What's your team's capacity? What's your vision? What are some milestones? And how could you start moving in a way that goes, we're definitely making progress, and we're going to do it in a reasonable way that's going to help bring the maximum number of people along with us. That's always the goal. So I encourage you to take just a minute today to look at your week ahead and go, how can I implement some of these learnings into the way I'm leading this week, and see what God will do. I hope you have an awesome week. I'm praying for you. I'm cheering for you. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and I'll see you very soon.